All right, welcome to Wednesday, March 30th. Good to see you today. Today we'll read 1 Samuel, chapters 14 through 16. Now, this is going to be a surprisingly long video, I think. There's a lot of stuff packed in here when it's just short, it's just stories. But there's some cool stuff in here that I've never really caught before like I should have. So remember before I was talking about, Saul's just really not a very good guy, but Jonathan defeats the Philistines. Saul almost has him killed for eating honey. Then the people are like, no, you're not going to do that. But I want you to notice there when it talks about the two sharp points, an interesting thing here. British General Allenby, who was leading during World War I, leading battles against the Ottoman Empire and what we know is now today is Israel. I'm going to put some links in the description so you can read up on this, because I read that and I'm like, no, this isn't true. But one of his majors was reading 1 Samuel. What would happen was, and this is the original source, I did not believe as much, but then I went and found it's true. So what the army was doing is they were going and buying Bibles, because Bibles have good maps in them of that very area. And so one of the majors heard of the town where they were about to have this battle, or remembered it from a Bible story he read. And so he found it, read it, and it's this story here where, just like the Battle of Thermopylae, back with the Spartans versus Xerxes, it was the narrowing down of the army. But where Jonathan went up, they read about this in World War I, and then ended up going and finding the same route and using it and winning the battle because of the Bible and knew that the Bible was true. Interesting. Keep seeing my screen flash. Hopefully this isn't all choppy. So you read chapter 15. Now you're wondering, God, that's not fair. He shouldn't be calling for the killing of all the Amalekites. Why would he do that? There's a couple answers to this question. The first one is found in the book of Esther. Remember the guy who tried to eliminate all of the Israelites? His name was Haman. Haman the what? Amalekite. And that whole thing could have been avoided had Saul been obedient. Saul says he killed everybody, but he didn't. Remember, it was the Amalekites that came out and fought against Israel in Exodus chapter 17. Remember Aaron and Hur raising up the hands of Moses. That's the battle that we're talking about here. Then remember in Deuteronomy chapter 25, Moses reminds the people that they fought them and killed the hindermost of the people. Wounded, they went after the feeble, they went after the weary. And so by this time, God gave them 500 years to change. God knew the past, God knew the future, and said, "Little for everybody, include the Amalekites if they're all dead." God gave them 500 years to change, and they didn't do it. This is judgment. And Samuel with his classic, what's with the bleeding? Saul blamed the people, and then Saul's making excuses. You read, Saul just doesn't get it. Do you ever talk to somebody like that who just doesn't get it and it doesn't click? Yeah. But a couple things are really learned about, God in these couple chapters. 1 Samuel chapter 15 verses 22 through 23 says, "And Samuel said, Hath the Lord his great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness as is iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king." So, a couple things in this chapter worry me. First off, you look in verse 30. Notice Saul says, "Lord, thy God." Doesn't call him his own. But then we see there Samuel takes care of business. One last time, the old guy steps up, huh? One thing that I hope we've learned through this time in our Bible is that God will use anyone. God will use sinners. God will use the weak. God will use the marginalized. He'll use anybody. But he will not use prideful and disobedient people. You see that Samuel weeps for Saul. God tells him to move on. God gets over it. But if we don't, we're ungodly. I want you to ponder that for a minute. Notice God doesn't tell Samuel to lie. but he does give him a distraction from his real purpose of being there. And so the second thing we learn about God here is that God looketh on the heart. Now that's not these verses are used for clothing, which is true, but it should worry us. God looks at our heart, not how we look, not our appearance, but he looks at our character. And so that is important. And looky here, Jesse didn't think enough of David even to bring him in from watching the sheep. And so I'll finish up this video with the story of Saul is odd when it comes to, you can't use words like salvation, saved, spirit-filled when we're talking about Old Testament men. But to ask the question, was Saul saved? Is he in heaven right now? I still Samuel chapter 28, when Saul goes to see the witch of Endor, calls up Samuel. Samuel said to that, "You'll be with me tomorrow." But remember, in this point in human history, heaven is still down. It's still paradise. It's not until Jesus leads captivity captive, and after his resurrection, that paradise and heaven is now up. So it could be that Samuel's telling Saul, "Yes, you'll be with me tomorrow," in the Luke chapter 16, 17 sense of the rich man and Lazarus, because then there'll be a great gulf effect. And I don't take this evil spirit from the Lord also to mean that he was, possessed with the devil. I don't know. All right. I hope you have a great Wednesday. Looking forward to study. Have a great day.